Welcome to File System Structure. This is our first video from the Linux portion of the RTFM. It's been so much fun worming our way through Cyber Inc., all the way down through Brian Leon's administrator workstation, all the way up to this Linux machine. In fact, our current SSH session here is all tunneled through Brian Leon's workstation. That way it looks like he's just SSH'd in doing his job every single day. So with that, I want to jump back into here. Let's talk about the Linux file system structure. So the first thing I want to point out is just the slash right here. Let's go ahead to an ls/. This is the very root of the hard drive, the very root of the file system. All directories, all programs installed, everything are below /. And I do want to mention, the more you interact with a Linux file system, the more comfortable you'll get moving around. You know, it's very similar to Windows and just the hierarchy and how it stores things, but there are also a ton of differences. A lot of processes and other things that are running on the machine that Windows just doesn't have files for. They all translate to files on Linux. So to do a process list, you could actually ls the process directory to see what's currently running, which is kind of cool. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Linux expert. However, just in the years, I have gotten a lot more comfortable moving around, administering Linux machines. It's been a good learning experience. So like I said, this is the root of the file system. Let's check out the /bin directory here, ls bin. The RTFM does do a great job explaining. I'm just gonna kind of talk over a few more of these that are there. So we have user binaries. These are a lot of the OS specific binaries that are loaded on the host. You're gonna find applications you install do put different files and things in some of these other directories, but for the most part, you're gonna find a lot of utilities you're used to, like who am I, which a lot of those utilities exist in this directory. I do want to mention, we're going to walk through a lot of these file system directories right here, and I'm going to give you a little bit more narrative behind what they each kind of contain. But if you do want to see all this in action, definitely skip to the next scenario video. That's when I'm actually going to enumerate this machine within this scenario, looking for sensitive files in a way we can potentially privesk on the machine. Next up here is /boot. Let's do an ls of that. You're going to get some version information. These are some of the files that are important in the Linux boot process. Typically in an assessment, I don't spend too much time here. I'm sure there are situations when it would be interesting to look into there, so those will come when they come. We're going to ls/dev. You're going to be interacting with this folder when you do different type of device manipulation. If you're looking for CD-ROMs, USB drives, you may be coming in here to mount devices and interact with them in that way. ls/etc. So you're going to find a lot of different software you install are going to put files and configuration files in the /etc directory. And just scrolling in here again, we don't have a ton on this machine. I do see some cron stuff, which we will get to later. We're going to be going through the cron section of the RTFM to list out cron jobs and other things like that. So you will find some useful things in here. Some of these RC directories are good for auto persistent startup. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The next one we're going to check out is actually /home. These are where all the user profiles are stored. You are going to live and breathe in this. So whenever you're doing any type of data mining, right, on a Windows machine, we're typically looking at their desktop, documents, downloads, any type of user profile specific information. Well, on a Linux machine, that's typically all in /home. So as you can see here, there are 3 users that are on this machine. We're going to be interrogating these folders in our scenario video, kind of looking through, seeing what we have access to. I am running as a low privileged user, so I don't have access to list out files in the Debian or Linux admin folders. Definitely something to keep in mind. Next up is lib. The RTFM kind of describes this as critical software libraries. Again, you're going to see a lot of different OS type files around in these different directories. I've actually done some Linux administration in the past where third-party programs install some configuration files and software over here that you have to go in there to modify. That's not necessarily uncommon. Definitely give it a glance, see if there's anything beyond OS files in there. Maybe you'll find some third-party applications that have also installed some files and other things in this folder, and you can go take a look. Opt is definitely more common. I would say it's one of the more popular places that third-party software installs to. I believe Wireshark, some of those other apps are actually going to install themselves into Opt. So if you're performing an assessment, definitely that should be your first place to look for any type of vulnerable third-party software or any potential escalation paths, you never know, or even just to see what's on the system. Maybe they have some type of defensive software. Definitely worth checking out. On my actual target system here, I don't have any extra software installed. I actually picked a pretty minimal version of Debian to run, so this isn't necessarily uncommon. Next up, we have /proc over here. Let's give that a search, /prc. Like I said, in Linux, a lot of the different system processes and things are actually correlated to files on the system. So when you look into /proc, this is a lot of the actual running process information. Typically in an assessment, I do a PS, I'll enumerate processes, I'll kill processes, I'll see what's running. There hasn't been too many times that I've needed to come into this directory to do anything specifically, but definitely know how it works and that it's available. Next up, we have /root. I am running as a basic user, so this won't work. However, I want you to know the /root directory is actually assigned and correlates to the most administrative user on a Linux machine. If you've ever heard the phrase, you gotta get root, that's usually specific to a Linux machine, and the root account has the highest privilege level on that machine. Think of it as a specific administrator on Windows or even the system account, right? /root, highest level of privilege. It has its own user profile directory in /root on the file system. So definitely look, see if you have access. If you do escalate your privileges, that's typically the first place I'll go look for any type of sensitive files or to get access to their actual terminal history. Next up, we have sbin. This is just typically another place you're gonna find a lot of different OS binaries. So if you look through here, you're probably gonna see TCP traceroute, shutdown, some other binaries that you're typically used to running on a Linux machine. They're typically in the /user directory. Temp is actually a pretty cool folder in Linux. It gets wiped on every single system reboot, which is kind of interesting, right? Make sure you don't save anything there that you want to keep there long term. It will get wiped if the machine turns off and turns back on. However, I would say I interact with the /temp folder a lot. Now, there's a couple caveats with the temp folder I do want to talk about. It typically is world writable, so it can be a decent place to drop files during some type of red team assessment or pen test. Now, because it is world writable, when you're doing a pen test or some type of red team assessment, so if you're looking for a place to stage files because you're a low privileged user, /temp is a great option. Now, I will say, because it is such a great option, a lot of malware and other things will write to /temp, and that can be problematic as a lot of defensive tool sets and other things will be watching the /temp folder very carefully to look for any type of exploits or other things that could be malicious. We have /user. Again, you're gonna see a lot of stuff in here. You have user bin, user sbin, games. Again, another place for some binaries. It says in the RTFM contains less critical files, so maybe not OS specific, maybe more user specific files. And then lastly, we have /var. Again, I've been in here configuring files for the OS, third-party applications, just another place for some apps to put files and other things. Well, that's a wrap on this video, just a narrative over the file system structure, what types of files you may find. Like I said, if you want to see me actually interrogating all these different folders, definitely click through to the scenario video. We're going to be data mining this machine, looking for a privilege escalation path.